So if you look at this, the government has a system where all subjects fall into about 20 clusters. And it's from these 20 clusters that students are able to select different university programs. I want us to take a brief moment and interpret all these in simple graphs so that you're able to have a deeper insight and understanding the relationship between different subjects and degree programs that are offered in different universities. In the first subject cluster, we have this graph whereby mathematics takes the lead. It opens doors into about 7 different clusters, followed by English stroke Kiswahili and biology. Then the rest of the combinations of the rest of the subjects. So this is very important for the first cluster subject. Math takes the lead. If you come to the second, physics as a standalone subject opens door into 4 different clusters, followed by English stroke Kiswahili. Then there is math, physics, chemistry, bio. That is math and group 2 subjects. Then math as a standalone subject. And then group 2 where we have physics, chemistry and biology. So this is very important when you are interpreting the second cluster subject. Therefore, it means that you have to take physics critically because it will open door into 4 different clusters. English, Kiswahili, 4 different clusters. Then the rest of the subjects follow. So the third cluster subjects, we have geography, history and government and religious education taking the lead into 4 different clusters. Then we have a combination of group 2 and group 3. That is chemistry, biology, physics, history and government, geography and religious education. Then we have a combination of biology, chemistry and geography. Opens into 3 different clusters. Physics, chemistry, biology, each of these will open into 3 different clusters. Therefore, when it comes to the third subject cluster, geography, history and government and religious education takes the lead in the number of different clusters it opens the door for. Then we have the fourth one, the fourth subject, whereby a combination of group 2, group 3, group 4 and group 5 takes the lead. So this means that a huge scope of subjects will take the lead of up to 14 different subject clusters. So this is very, very important for you to have an overview of which areas you need to take very serious consideration as you focus in your studies. So when you look at these subject clusters and combinations, the first one having math being mentioned alone, then we have a situation in subject cluster 2 where math is mentioned with physics, math alone, and then math is mentioned with other groups. For example, this group 2. When you combine all these and we look at what we call the subject cluster density or cluster subject density, to what degree is a given subject being mentioned across all the clusters, you discover that biology takes the lead with a cluster subject density of about 40. This is biology, takes the lead. Then followed by physics and chemistry, followed by geography, followed by religious education and history and government, then the rest of the subjects. Therefore, this means that if you want to have more openings into different clusters, then you have to do very well in biology as we see from this, because it's mentioned in most of the clusters, followed by physics and chemistry, then followed by geography. So you need to take this extremely considerably seriously, because the more the points you have in biology, physics, chemistry, and geography, the greater the chances of appearing in as many, clusters as possible, and that opens the doors for your future career. I would wish to re-emphasize that having the 4 cluster subjects performance will determine your weight, the cluster weight that you may score at the end of the day. So this means that we need to look at how this is done and how it can easily affect your overall performance. Usually, for us to get the weight, and take this. So for us to get the weight is given by considering a formula that is the square root of that is R over M times API over SPI. So this is a situation whereby we are now focusing more on performance and not on the grade. This formula has been put in the system, is inbuilt. So when you input your scores, or when the scores are picked from NEC, it automatically calculates the weight. So that's why when you go to the system, you get already input values for your different cluster weights in different programs that you would be interested in the university. So what does this really mean? This is interpreted to mean that this R is your actual performance in that subject, in that given subject. Then we have M. This M here, M is the performance of the best student that year in that subject, best student in the subject. Then we have API is your performance in the 7 subjects. I will be looking at that shortly. The 7 subjects, that simply means that you are going to have English, you're going to have so you are going to have English stroke Kiswahili plus mathematics, because these are compulsory subjects, plus the other 5, the way you are performed in those subjects. And then we have SPI, which is the performance of the best student that year, in the 7 subjects that year. So that's also means that you are going to consider what this student got in English stroke Kiswahili plus math as compulsory, then you add the other 5 subjects. So what is the drill in all this? What you need to know is that given that this student, let's say, are in which subject? We are having we are having, say, R in our cluster subjects for this particular case. Let me use yes, to use a different ink so that I distinguish these. Yes, so let's say this is R in subject first cluster plus second cluster plus third cluster plus fourth cluster. So that gives us the performance, your performance in those 4 clusters, and these must be against the best student also in those different subjects. So that is going to be, say, this best student in this cluster subject 1, these 2, these 3, these 4. Then you come to the overall performance in the 7 subjects. Then this is yours, then this is against the best student in this. So what does this mean? This means that when your performance is moving towards the best student, let's take a case whereby the best student has 48. Let's say the best student has 48 points for that particular case, 48, and you also score 48. So this part here becomes 1. Then your performance also matches the best student. Let's say 84. So this point here becomes 1. So it's 1 times 1, which is going to be 1. The square root of 1 is 1. We multiply by 48, so you'll have total points, which is going to be 48. So what you need to know is that the more your score matches the best student, the greater your weights, or the greater the points you get for that particular year. So that your aim should shift your focus from focusing on, you must shift your focus from mere grades to, the actual performance. This means that the placement unit or the placement body will not rely on the grades in your placement, but it will rely on the actual performance. So don't be happy that you have scored an A. This is not enough. Ask yourself, what is your actual marks in this particular subject that you have scored an A? So let's say if you have scored that A in mathematics, now that, say, math is the cluster subject, and you have scored 80 marks, and another student in math has scored 90, and the best student that year in mathematics has, let's say, 94. It means that the weight that will be generated for the student who has 90 will be greater than the student who has 80, because 90 is moving towards 94, and that means that it is moving towards 1. If it moves towards 1, when you multiply by 48, then it means that you are going to get greater cluster weight. So that is an important point that you need to keep in mind. It's no longer about grades, it's about the actual performance. And even going forward, we may consider, let's say, exceeding expectation 1, just the way we've been considering the case of a straight A. This exceeding expectation 1 should not be the focus if the placement unit uses the same criteria going forward. Why? Because you cannot have a breaking point, or the breaking method point if you are only considering a grade. This is a grade, only that this is now EE1 and this is grade A. We must narrow down and see, what did this student score in this, what did this student score in this. If the concept of performance ranking still works. What we are saying here is actually performance ranking. What is your score against the best student? What in this particular cluster subject, let's say cluster subject 1, and that cluster subject 1, let's say the career or the course that you want is focusing more on this cluster subject 2, cluster subject 1, say it's focusing on biology, for example. Biology is required, for example. What is your score in biology against the best student that particular year in biology? Then what is your performance in English or Kiswahili in this subject class, cluster 1, that is required for your career against the best student that year? Therefore, this is extremely dynamic. You need to understand that it is not rigid. It is dependent on the best student that particular year and how does it relate to the overall performance. And that's why in this part here, while we focus on the individual subjects, at this particular point here, you must also look at the overall performance in the other subjects. Therefore, what I want to emphasize for students to keep in mind is that when you have fixed the issue of the individual subjects, you are sure that your cluster subjects that are required for your career, you have fixed them. You must take advantage of the other subjects which are also not in the cluster subjects, but they are also going to affect your weights, that is to say your overall performance. Therefore, don't just say I want to study this course, therefore if this cluster subject for this course, then I don't care about the other course. That is a misnomer, because your cluster weight will be greatly affected, and when this is affected, you will not be able to get the correct course that you really want. So I felt like I wanted to bring your attention to that, and I really appreciate for your time. You are interested in getting far much more deeper insight in this and the classical motivation into your classwork and also into your future career, then don't hesitate to get in touch with me. That is +254 37 that is 20 97 80 43. Booking for Career Talk is ongoing. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.